Robert Webb's heart pounds as he slips through the airlock of the Brunali spaceship. Known for his lethal efficiency in combat against alien races, the human soldier moves with practiced stealth. His mission: gather crucial intelligence on Brunali technology to end the interstellar war. Alarms blare suddenly, piercing the vessel's eerie silence. Robert curses under his breath, realizing the ship's security systems have detected his presence. He quickens his pace, navigating the labyrinthine corridors with heightened urgency. As he rounds a corner, Robert comes face to face with Zara, a Brunali female scientist working late in her laboratory. Her eyes widen in terror as she recognizes the human intruder. Stories of ruthless human warriors flood her mind, and she bolts, fearing for her life. Zara's panicked footsteps echo through the ship as she flees, with Robert in close pursuit. She darts into a storage compartment, realizing too late it's a dead end. Trapped, she turns to face her pursuer, trembling with fear. Robert enters the compartment, assessing the situation quickly. He sees the terror in Zara's eyes and makes a split-second decision. Instead of attacking, he approaches her slowly, hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. "I'm not here to hurt you," Robert says, his voice low and steady. "I need your help." Zara blinks in confusion, her body still tense. She had braced herself for a violent assault, but Robert's gentle demeanor catches her off guard. Cautiously, he explains his true mission, revealing the potential to end the war between their species. As Robert speaks, Zara's fear begins to give way to curiosity. She studies the human soldier, noting the intelligence in his eyes and the careful way he maintains his distance. Despite her initial terror, she finds herself drawn to his unexpected kindness. Robert, too, is intrigued by the Brunali scientist. He admires her quick thinking and the way she holds herself with dignity, even in the face of danger. A tentative physical attraction begins to spark between them, surprising them both. Their moment of connection is shattered by the sound of approaching Brunali security forces. Robert tenses, ready for action. "We need to move," he says urgently. "Will you help me?" Zara hesitates, torn between her duty to her people and the growing realization that this human might not be the monster she'd believed. Making a decision that will change both their lives, she nods. "Follow me. I know a way out." Together, they slip out of the storage compartment, moving swiftly through the ship's corridors. Robert's combat skills and Zara's knowledge of the vessel's layout prove a formidable combination as they evade the search parties. As they navigate the dangers around them, Robert and Zara find themselves working in seamless coordination. Their initial fear and mistrust gradually transform into a complex emotional and physical connection. Stolen glances and brief touches hint at a deeper attraction forming between them. With Brunali forces closing in, Robert and Zara reach a critical juncture. They must make a daring escape or risk capture. As they stand at the precipice of their next move, the unlikely pair realizes that their encounter has set in motion events that will not only affect their own lives, but potentially reshape the future of human-Brunali relations. In this moment of crisis, surrounded by danger and uncertainty, Robert and Zara find themselves on the brink of an unexpected romance. Their growing bond, forged in the crucible of conflict, holds the promise of bridging the gap between their warring species and ushering in a new era of understanding and peace. With a decisive nod, Zara leads Robert through a maze of service tunnels, their footsteps echoing softly against the metal walls. The ship's alarms continue to blare, but grow fainter as they put distance between themselves and their pursuers. "There's an emergency escape pod bay just ahead," Zara whispers, her breath quickening with exertion. "It's our best chance." Robert nods, impressed by her quick thinking and knowledge of the ship's layout. As they round the final corner, they're met with the sight of a small, sleek pod nestled in its docking bay. "Cover me," Robert says, moving swiftly to the pod's control panel. His fingers fly over the interface, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. Zara keeps watch, her eyes darting nervously between the corridor and Robert's progress. The sound of boots pounding on metal reaches her ears, growing louder by the second. "They're coming," she hisses urgently. Just as the first Brunali security officer appears at the far end of the corridor, the escape pod's hatch hisses open. Robert grabs Zara's hand, pulling her inside with him. The door seals shut behind them, muffling the shouts and weapons fire from outside. Robert's hands move in a blur over the pod's controls. With a violent lurch, they detach from the Brutalize ship, rocketing out into the vastness of space. Zara stumbles, caught off guard by the sudden acceleration, and finds herself pressed against Robert's solid form. For a moment, they stay like that, hearts racing in tandem. "Hang on," Robert warns, his voice tight with concentration. "This is going to get rough." He guides the pod through a dense asteroid field, the small vessel bucking and weaving as it narrowly avoids collisions. Zara watches in awe as Robert's hands dance over the controls, making split-second adjustments that keep them alive. A flash of light catches her eye, and she turns to see a Brunali pursuit vessel emerging from the asteroid field behind them. "We've got company," she says, trying to keep the fear from her voice. Robert's jaw clenches as he pushes the escape pod to its limits, using the asteroids as cover. The pursuing ship fires, missing them by mere meters and obliterating a nearby asteroid. The shockwave rocks their pod violently. Suddenly, a series of alarms begin blaring inside the cramped vessel. Sarah's eyes widen as she scans the readouts. "The life support systems are failing," she reports, her scientific mind already analyzing the data. "We took damage during the launch." Robert curses under his breath, his brow furrowed in concentration as he continues to evade their pursuers. "Can you stabilize it?" Zara nods, moving to access the pod's maintenance systems. As she works, the temperature inside the small craft begins to rise rapidly. Sweat beads on her forehead, and she can see Robert's shirt beginning to stick to his back. "I've managed to reroute some power," she says, her voice strained. "But the environmental controls are shot. It's going to get hot in here." As if on cue, the temperature spikes again. Robert grunts in discomfort, using one hand to strip off his outer jacket, while the other remains steady on the controls. Zara finds her eyes drawn to the play of muscles beneath his now damp shirt, a strange flutter in her stomach at the sight. Pushing aside the unfamiliar sensation, Zara removes her own outer layer, revealing the form-fitting undersuit typical of Brunali scientists. She notices Robert's quick glance in her direction, his eyes widening slightly before snapping back to the view screen. The pursuing ship fires again, the blast glancing off an asteroid and sending a shower of debris towards them. Robert executes a series of dizzying maneuvers, narrowly avoiding the deadly hail of rocks. "Hold on!" he shouts, spotting a gap in the asteroid field. With a burst of speed, he guides the pod through the opening, leaving their pursuers trapped behind a wall of tumbling space rock. As the immediate danger passes, Robert lets out a long breath, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. He turns to Zara, a hint of a smile on his lips. "Nice work with the life support. You saved our skins back there." Zara feels a warmth in her chest at his praise, surprising herself with how much it affects her. As the adrenaline of their escape begins to fade, she becomes acutely aware of their close proximity in the small pod. The heat continues to build, and she finds her eyes drawn to a bead of sweat trailing down Robert's neck. "So," she says, trying to distract herself from these strange new feelings, "now that we're not about to die, perhaps you could explain more about this mission of yours." Robert nods, his expression growing serious. "It's a long story, but we've got time. The short version is, this war between our people, it's based on lies and misunderstandings. I was sent to gather intel that could expose the truth and potentially end the conflict." Zara listens intently as Robert begins to elaborate, her scientific curiosity piqued. As he speaks, she finds herself studying him more closely, noting the differences between his human physiology and her own Brunali features. The heat in the pod seems to intensify, making her lightheaded. "Are you all right?" Robert asks, noticing her slightly unfocused gaze. Zara blinks, trying to clear her head. "The oxygen levels," she murmurs, her words slightly slurred. "They must be dropping faster than I thought." Robert's expression shifts to one of concern. He reaches out, gently pulling her closer to him. "Here, let me check your vitals," he says, his touch sending an unexpected shiver through her, despite the heat. As Robert holds her, monitoring her condition, Zara finds herself acutely aware of his proximity. In her oxygen-deprived state, she looks up at him, seeing not an enemy or even just an ally, but something more. The attraction she's been fighting since their first encounter bubbles to the surface, clouding her normally rational mind. Just as Sarah opens her mouth to speak, a new alarm sounds from the pod's communication system. Robert's head snaps up, his body tensing. "It's a human frequency," he says, his voice a mix of hope and apprehension. A gruff voice crackles through the speaker. "Unidentified vessel, this is Captain Marcus Steele of the UES Vigilant. Identify yourself and prepare to be boarded." Robert and Sarah exchange a loaded glance, both aware that this encounter could determine not just their fate, but potentially the future of human-Brunali relations. As Robert reaches for the communication controls, Sarah places her hand on his arm, a gesture of solidarity and trust. The tension in the small escape pod is palpable as Robert prepares to respond, knowing that his next words could change everything. The human patrol ship looms closer, its intentions yet unknown, as Robert and Sarah brace themselves for whatever comes next. Robert took a deep breath, steadying himself before responding to the communication. "This is Lieutenant Robert Chen of the UES Intrepid. I'm on a classified mission and have vital intelligence to share, requesting permission to come aboard." There was a moment of tense silence before Captain Steele's voice crackled through the speaker again. "Acknowledged, Lieutenant. Prepare for docking procedures." As the escape pod was drawn into the Vigilant's hangar bay, Robert turned to Sarah, his expression a mix of relief and apprehension. "Stay close to me," he said softly. "I'll explain everything to the captain." The pod's hatch hissed open, revealing a group of armed security officers led by a stern-faced man Robert assumed was Captain Steele. The captain's eyes narrowed as they fell on Sarah, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm. "At ease, Captain," Robert said, stepping forward with his hands raised. "This is Sarah, a Brunali scientist. She's not a threat. In fact, she's been instrumental in my mission." Captain Steele's suspicious gaze flickered between Robert and Sarah. "You have exactly 1 minute to convince me why I shouldn't throw both of you in the brig, Lieutenant." Robert launched into a concise explanation of his mission, emphasizing the potential for ending the war. As he spoke, Sarah noticed the subtle shift in the captain's demeanor, his rigid posture gradually relaxing. "All right, Lieutenant," Steele said after a long moment. "I'm willing to hear you out, but I can't risk having an unknown alien freely roaming my ship. You'll both be confined to separate quarters until we can verify your story." Robert opened his mouth to protest, but Sarah placed a gentle hand on his arm. "It's okay," she said softly. "We knew this wouldn't be easy." As they were led to their respective quarters, Robert and Sarah exchanged a lingering look, silently promising to find a way back to each other. Over the next few days, Robert and Sarah underwent intense debriefings. Robert shared detailed information about Brunali technology and defenses, while Sarah provided invaluable insights into her people's military strategies and weaknesses. Captain Steele found himself increasingly impressed by the depth and quality of their intelligence. He watched through a one-way mirror as Sarah expertly broke down complex Brunali battle formations, her slender fingers tracing patterns on a digital map. "This is incredible," Steele muttered to his XO. "If this checks out, it could change everything." As the days passed, the captain began to relax the restrictions on Robert and Sarah. They were allowed to move about the ship under escort, and soon found themselves spending more time together. In the mess hall, Robert and Sarah sat across from each other, their trays laden with an assortment of human foods. Sarah eyed a slice of pizza warily before taking a tentative bite. Her eyes widened in surprise. "This is quite good," she said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Robert laughed, the sound drawing curious glances from nearby crew members. "Wait until you try ice cream," he said, his eyes twinkling. As they continued to share meals and work together, the attraction between them grew more palpable. Crew members whispered about the way Robert's hand would linger on Sarah's back as he guided her through a doorway, or how Sarah's eyes would light up when Robert entered a room. One evening, Robert found Sarah working late in the ship's laboratory. She was bent over a microscope, her brow furrowed in concentration. The soft blue glow of the equipment cast an ethereal light on her features, accentuating the subtle alien qualities that Robert found so captivating. "Hey," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. Sarah looked up, a smile spreading across her face. "Robert, I didn't hear you come in. He moved closer, ostensibly to look at her work, but they both knew it was more than that. The air between them crackled with tension as their bodies drew nearer. Sarah, Robert breathed, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Words failed him as Sarah leaned in, closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a searing kiss, years of conflict and mistrust melting away in an instant. Robert pulled her closer, marveling at the feel of her alien yet familiar body against his. Their kisses grew more heated, hands exploring newfound territory. Robert lifted Sarah onto the lab bench, stepping between her legs as she wrapped them around his waist. Clothes were hastily removed as they gave in to their long-suppressed desires. Their lovemaking was a fusion of tenderness and passion, each touch a discovery, each gasp a revelation. As they moved together, Robert and Sarah found themselves transcending the boundaries of their species, becoming simply two beings united in pleasure and affection. Unbeknownst to the entwined lovers, a security camera silently recorded their intimate encounter. Within hours, the footage had spread through the ship's network like wildfire. In his quarters, Captain Steele stared at the video, playing on his personal terminal, his expression unreadable. He knew this development could either be the key to lasting peace or the spark that ignited an even greater conflict. As the Vigilant continued its journey towards the human military outpost, the captain wrestled with his decision. The future of human-Brunali relations might well hinge on how he handled this unexpected turn of events. Meanwhile, light years away, a sleek Brunali stealth ship slipped silently through the void of space. In its command center, the operative known as Zara studied a holographic display of the UES Vigilant's projected course. "Soon," she murmured, her eyes glinting with persistence. "Soon we'll know if you're a traitor, Sarah, or the key to our victory." Victory. The UES Vigilant glided smoothly into the docking bay of the sprawling military outpost. As the ship's engines powered down, Robert and Sarah exchanged nervous glances. Their brief moment of intimacy in the lab seemed a lifetime ago, overshadowed by the uncertainty that lay ahead. Captain Steele's voice crackled over the intercom. "Lieutenant Chen and guest report to the main airlock for disembarkation." As they made their way through the ship's corridors, Robert placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's lower back. "Stay close," he murmured. "I'll do the talking." The airlock hissed open, revealing a stern-faced man with graying hair and the stripes of an admiral on his uniform. Flanking him were several armed guards, their expressions impassive. "Welcome to Outpost Omega, Lieutenant," the man said, his eyes locked on Sarah. "I'm Admiral Hawkins. I trust your journey was enlightening." Robert snapped to attention. "Sir, I have critical intelligence." Admiral Hawkins held up a hand, silencing him. "All in good time, Lieutenant. First, we need to address the, biological concerns." He nodded to a woman in a medical uniform. "Dr. Chen, please escort our Brunali visitor to the medical bay for a full examination." Sarah tensed, her eyes darting to Robert. He gave her a subtle nod, trying to convey reassurance. "This way, please," Dr. Chen said, her tone professional but not unkind. As Sarah was led away, Admiral Hawkins turned to Robert. "You and I have much to discuss, Lieutenant. Captain Steele, join us in my office." The medical bay was a stark contrast to the utilitarian corridors of the outpost. Clean, white surfaces gleamed under bright lights, and the air hummed with the soft beep of various machines. Dr. Emily Chen guided Sarah to an examination table. "Please, make yourself comfortable," she said, reaching for a handheld scanner. "This won't hurt a bit." As the doctor began her examination, Sarah couldn't help but feel like a specimen under a microscope. She watched Dr. Chen's face carefully, noting the subtle changes in her expression as the scan progressed. "Fascinating," Dr. Chen muttered, her eyes widening. "Your cardiovascular system is unlike anything I've ever seen. And these glands here—" She trailed off, engrossed in the data scrolling across her screen. Meanwhile, in Admiral Hawkins's office, Robert stood at attention, acutely aware of the weight of Captain Steele's gaze on him. "At ease, Lieutenant," Hawkins said, settling into his chair. "Your reports have caused quite a stir in high command. A human Brunali liaison was not an outcome we anticipated." Robert felt his face flush. "Sir, I can explain. No need, Hawkins cut him off. In fact, this development could prove invaluable. He leaned forward, his eyes glinting. We want you to continue fostering this relationship with the Brunali female. Get close to her, learn everything you can about her species, their weaknesses, their plans. Robert's stomach churned. Sir, with all due respect. This isn't a request, Lieutenant, Hawkins said, his voice hard. It's an order. The fate of humanity could hinge on the intelligence you gather. As Robert grappled with the implications of his new assignment, across the outpost, a nondescript maintenance worker moved through the corridors. Her movements were precise, her eyes constantly scanning her surroundings. To any observer, she was just another cog in the machine of the massive facility. But Zara was far from ordinary. Her Brunali features were hidden behind a sophisticated holographic disguise, allowing her to move freely among the humans. She paused near the medical bay, her enhanced hearing picking up fragments of conversation from within. Unprecedented cellular regeneration. Potential applications in human medicine. Zara's lips curved into a small smile. Sarah's presence here was already yielding valuable intelligence. She moved on, careful not to linger too long in one place. Hours later, Robert paced anxiously outside the medical bay. When the doors finally slid open, he rushed to Sarah's side. Are you all right? He asked, his hands instinctively reaching for hers. Sarah nodded, looking tired but unharmed. They were thorough, she said with a wry smile. Their reunion was cut short by the arrival of Admiral Hawkins and Dr. Chen. The doctor's eyes were bright with excitement. Lieutenant Sarah, Hawkins said, I have an assignment for you both. We're initiating a joint research project, combining human and Brunali technology to develop a new propulsion system. Your unique partnership makes you ideal candidates to lead this endeavor. Robert and Sarah exchanged surprised looks. It seemed too good to be true, a chance to work together, to potentially bridge the gap between their species. But Robert couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his gut, knowing the true motivations behind the Admiral's generosity. As they were led to their new research lab, neither Robert nor Sarah noticed the maintenance worker who paused to watch them pass. Zara's eyes narrowed as she observed their body language, the subtle touches, the way they unconsciously leaned towards each other. This was an unexpected complication, but one she could use to her advantage. As she resumed her work, Zara's mind raced with new possibilities. The game had changed, and she was determined to turn this development to the Brunali's favor. In the shadows of the outpost, another figure watched Robert and Sarah with growing disdain. Sgt Graves clenched his fists, disgust twisting his features, as he saw the human lieutenant place a gentle hand on the alien's back. This is wrong, he muttered to the small group of soldiers gathered around him. We can't let this abomination continue. His followers nodded in agreement, their faces set with dedication. As Robert and Sarah disappeared into their new lab, blissfully unaware of the forces aligning against them, Graves began to outline his plan. The stage was set for a clash that would shake the foundations of human-Brunali relations, with Robert and Sarah caught in the crossfire. As they immersed themselves in their research, the delicate balance of power within the outpost began to shift, threatening to ignite a conflict that could change the course of the war and their lives forever. Forever. The delicate balance of power within the outpost teetered on the brink of chaos, with Robert and Sarah unwittingly at its center. Their peaceful research was shattered when an explosion rocked the lab, sending equipment crashing to the floor. Alarms blared as smoke filled the air. Robert instinctively shielded Sarah with his body, pulling her down behind a workstation. Are you all right? He shouted over the din, his eyes scanning her for injuries. Sarah nodded, coughing. What's happening? Before Robert could respond, security teams flooded the lab, weapons drawn. Admiral Hawkins strode in behind them, his face a mask of almost unchecked fury. Lieutenant Chen, Sarah, come with me immediately, he ordered, gesturing to a group of guards. The rest of you, secure this area and begin the investigation. As they were hurried through the corridors, Robert caught glimpses of chaos, crew members running, smoke billowing from damaged sections. He felt Sarah's hand slip into his, gripping tightly. They were ushered into a secure briefing room where Captain Steele and several high-ranking officers waited. Admiral Hawkins wasted no time with pleasantries. "We've had a sabotage attempt," he said, his voice grim. "Preliminary evidence suggests it was aimed at disrupting your research." Robert's mind raced. "Sir, who would—" "We have our suspicions." Hawkins cut him off, glancing pointedly at Zara. Zara stiffened beside Robert. "You think my people are responsible?" "We're not ruling anything out," Hawkins replied coldly. "For now, both of you will be relocated to more secure quarters. For your own protection, of course." Robert opened his mouth to protest, but thought better of it. He could feel the tension radiating from Zara, and knew this wasn't the time or place for an argument. Their new living space was larger than their previous quarters, but felt more like a gilded cage. High-tech security systems monitored their every move, and armed guards were posted outside their door. As the days passed, Robert and Zara found solace in each other's company. Their forced proximity only intensified the bond between them. Late at night, when the Outpost systems dimmed to simulate evening, they would lie together, bodies intertwined, whispering hopes and fears. "Do you ever regret coming here?" Robert asked one night, tracing patterns on Zara's skin. She turned to face him, her alien eyes shimmering in the low light. "Never," she said softly, leaning in to kiss him deeply. Their passionate encounters became more frequent, a way to escape the growing pressure around them. Neither was aware of the hidden cameras capturing their most intimate moments, feeding data to unseen observers. 2 weeks after the sabotage attempt, a new arrival to the Outpost shook things up. Dr. Elias Vorn, a tall, lanky man with piercing green eyes and a mop of unruly gray hair, was introduced as a specialist in xenobiology and interspecies relations. "Dr. Vorn will be conducting a series of tests and interviews with you both," Admiral Hawkins explained during a tense meeting. "His research could prove invaluable for future human-Brunali interactions." Robert felt Zara tense beside him. "We're not lab rats," he protested. Dr. Vorn smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I assure you, Lieutenant, my methods are quite humane. You'll hardly notice I'm here." But they did notice. Dr. Vorn's presence became a constant intrusion in their lives. He observed their interactions, asked probing questions about their relationship, and subjected them to a battery of physical and psychological tests. Meanwhile, outside their bubble of scrutiny, tensions in the Outpost were reaching a boiling point. Sgt Marcus Graves and his xenophobic followers grew bolder in their actions against Zara. It started small, dirty looks, and whispered insults in the corridors. Then Zara's personal belongings began to go missing or turn up damaged. One day at lunch, she took a bite of her meal and immediately spat it out, her face contorting in disgust. "What's wrong?" Robert asked, alarmed. Zara pushed the tray away. "It tastes wrong, like it's been tampered with." Robert's face hardened as he scanned the mess hall, catching sight of Graves and his cronies snickering at a nearby table. He started to rise, but Zara's hand on his arm stopped him. "Don't," she said softly. "It will only make things worse." As the incidents escalated, Robert became increasingly protective of Zara. He rarely left her side, glaring at anyone who dared to look at her sideways. His behavior didn't go unnoticed by Dr. Vorn, who watched their interactions with growing interest. One evening, as they returned to their quarters after another grueling session with Dr. Vorn, they found a young woman waiting for them. She introduced herself as Ensign Mara Collins, a junior engineer. "I just wanted to say, I think what they're doing to you is wrong," she said, her eyes darting nervously. "If you ever need anything, someone to talk to." Zara smiled warmly, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Ensign. That means a lot." As Mara walked away, neither Robert nor Zara noticed the satisfied glint in her eye. In the shadows of a nearby corridor, Zara allowed her holographic disguise to flicker for a moment, pleased with her successful approach. The next day, during a routine maintenance check on their quarters, all hell broke loose. Robert had stepped out briefly to speak with Dr. Vorn when he heard a commotion from inside the room. He burst through the door to find Sgt Graves and 2 of his followers advancing on Zara, who was backed against the wall. Without hesitation, Robert launched himself at Graves, tackling him to the ground. Fists flew as the other 2 men joined the fray. Zara grabbed a nearby lamp, swinging it at one of the attackers. The fight was brutal and short-lived. By the time security arrived, both Graves and Robert were bloodied, and one of Graves' men lay unconscious on the floor. In the aftermath, Admiral Hawkins was forced to take decisive action. Graves and his supporters were confined to the brig, and the Admiral issued a public statement reaffirming his support for Robert and Sarah's relationship and the importance of their research. As a medtech treated Robert's cuts and bruises, Sarah sat beside him, her hand resting protectively on his arm. They exchanged a look that spoke volumes: relief, fear, and something deeper that had been growing between them for weeks. "We need to talk about the future," Robert said softly, wincing as the medtech applied a dermal regenerator to a particularly nasty gash. Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Yes, we do." Neither of them noticed the small maintenance drone hovering in the corner of the room, its sensors recording every word and gesture. In her hidden observation post, Zara watched the feed with growing concern. Her mission to extract Sarah was becoming more complicated by the day. As the medtech finished and left them alone, Robert took Sarah's hands in his. "I know it won't be easy," he began, "but I want to try to make this work. Us, a real future together." Sarah's eyes shimmered with emotion. "I want that too," she whispered. "But how? Our people—" Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion in the corridor outside. Admiral Hawkins burst into the room, his face a mix of anxiety and excitement. "We've just received word," he announced, slightly out of breath. "A Brunali diplomatic envoy is on its way here. They want to investigate the situation, and they're led by Ambassador Thea herself." Robert and Sarah exchanged shocked looks. The arrival of a high-ranking Brunali official could change everything. For better or worse, as they absorbed the news, the realization sank in. Their relationship, once a private matter, now held the potential to shape the future of human Brunali relations. With the diplomatic envoy approaching and tensions at the outpost higher than ever, Robert and Sarah found themselves at the center of a storm that threatened to either tear them apart or forge a new path for both their species. As they clung to each other in the sterile medical bay, both wondered what challenges the coming days would bring, and if their love could withstand the pressure of becoming a symbol for interstellar peace. The news of the approaching Brunali diplomatic envoy sent shockwaves through the outpost. Robert and Sarah exchanged a nervous glance as Admiral Hawkins outlined the situation. The arrival of Ambassador Thea herself signaled the gravity of the moment. "We need to present a united front," Hawkins said, his voice tight with tension. "Your relationship may be unconventional, but it represents a breakthrough in human Brunali cooperation. We must use this to our advantage." Robert nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He reached for Sarah's hand, finding comfort in her touch. As the Brunali ship docked, a flurry of activity consumed the outpost. Crew members scrambled to prepare for the high-profile guests, while security teams maintained a vigilant watch for any potential threats. Robert adjusted his dress uniform, stealing a glance at Sarah. She wore a formal Brunali gown, its iridescent fabric shimmering with each movement. Despite the circumstances, he couldn't help but admire her beauty. "Ready?" he asked softly. Sarah took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "As I'll ever be." They entered the reception hall together, immediately drawing the attention of both human and Brunali delegates. Ambassador Thea, a statuesque figure with piercing silver eyes, zeroed in on them immediately. "Lieutenant Chen, Sarah," Admiral Hawkins called, waving them over. "Allow me to introduce Ambassador Thea." The Brunali diplomat inclined her head, her gaze flickering between Robert and Sarah with undisguised interest. "I've heard much about you both. Your work together has caused quite a stir." Robert felt Sarah stiffen beside him. He squeezed her hand reassuringly before responding. "We're honored to meet you, Ambassador. We hope our research will benefit both our peoples." Thea's lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Indeed. Sarah, I wonder if I might have a word with you in private. I'm eager to hear about your experiences among the humans." Sarah hesitated, glancing at Robert. He nodded encouragingly, though his stomach twisted with unease. As Sarah followed the ambassador to a secluded corner, Robert found himself cornered by Captain Steele. A word, Lieutenant, Steele said, his voice low and urgent. New orders from High Command. They want you to use your connection with Zara to our advantage. We need intel on Brunali military capabilities. Robert's blood ran cold. Sir, I can't. Steele cut him off. This isn't a request, Chen. The future of human-Brunali relations may hinge on what we learn here. Across the room, Zara sat rigidly as Ambassador Thea leaned in close. You've grown quite fond of the humans, haven't you? Thara's voice was silk over steel. Particularly Lieutenant Chen, I hope you haven't forgotten where your true loyalties lie. Zara met the ambassador's gaze steadily. My work here has been for the benefit of both our peoples. My relationship with Robert doesn't change that. Thara's eyes narrowed. We shall see. As the reception continued, neither Robert nor Zara noticed the maintenance worker weaving through the crowd. Zara's eyes darted from the couple to a member of the Brunali delegation. With practiced ease, she slipped a data chip into the delegate's hand, their fingers brushing for only a moment. Everything you need to know about the Outpost defenses and the Joint Research Project, Zara murmured. And a warning, Zara may be compromised. Her attachment to the human could complicate things. The delegate nodded almost imperceptibly before melting back into the crowd. As the evening wore on, Robert and Zara found themselves constantly surrounded by curious delegates from both sides. Their every interaction was scrutinized, their body language analyzed for hidden meanings. In a rare moment alone, Robert pulled Zara into a quiet alcove. Are you okay? He asked, searching her face. What did the ambassador want? Zara's eyes darted around nervously. She suspects. She thinks I might have divided loyalties. Robert, I'm scared. What if they try to separate us? Robert cupped her face gently. We won't let that happen. We'll figure this out together. Their moment of privacy was shattered as Dr. Vorn's voice rang out across the reception hall. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a remarkable announcement to make. All eyes turned to the eccentric scientist as he strode to the center of the room, datapad in hand. My research into Lieutenant Chen and Zara's unique bond has yielded extraordinary results. Their union could pave the way for unprecedented advancements in interspecies biology. We may even be looking at the possibility of human-Brunali hybrids. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Robert felt Zara tense beside him as murmurs of shock and excitement filled the air. Some faces lit up with wonder, while others darkened with disgust. Ambassador Thea's eyes gleamed with a predatory light as she approached Robert and Zara. It seems your relationship may be even more valuable than we initially thought. Perhaps it's time we discussed your future roles as liaisons between our species. As the implications of Dr. Vorn's announcement sank in, Robert and Zara found themselves at the center of a political storm. The private nature of their relationship had been stripped away, replaced by the weight of two civilizations' expectations. Admiral Hawkins stepped forward, his face a mask of forced calm. I think we've all had enough excitement for one evening. Lieutenant Chen, Zara, please allow me to escort you to your quarters. We've assigned additional security for your protection. As they left the reception hall, Robert and Zara exchanged a worried glance. The simple life they had built together now seemed like a distant memory. Ahead lay a future filled with uncertainty, political machinations, and the eyes of two worlds upon them. In the shadows of the outpost, Zara watched them go, her mind racing with new possibilities. The game had changed once again, and she was determined to turn these unexpected developments to the Brunali's advantage. As Robert and Zara entered their quarters, now guarded by a watchful security detail, they knew that the decisions they made in the coming days would shape not only their own futures, but potentially the fate of human-Brunali relations for generations to come. Robert and Zara exchanged a meaningful glance as they entered their quarters, the weight of the evening's events settling heavily upon them. Once the door slid shut, Zara let out a long breath, her shoulders sagging. What are we going to do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. I think we need to take control of this situation before it controls us. They spent the next few hours in deep discussion, weighing their options and considering the potential consequences of each choice. As the station's artificial night cycle began, they reached a decision. The following morning, Robert and Sarah requested a private audience with Admiral Hawkins and Ambassador Thea. The meeting took place in a small, secure conference room with only the four of them present. "We've made a decision," Robert began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "We want to accept the role as official liaisons between humans and Brunali." Ambassador Thea's silver eyes widened slightly, a hint of satisfaction crossing her features. Admiral Hawkins leaned forward, his expression a mix of surprise and calculation. "Are you certain?" Hawkins asked. "This won't be an easy path." Sarah nodded, her hand finding Robert's under the table. "We understand the challenges, but we believe this is the best way to ensure our work continues and to foster understanding between our peoples." The news of their decision spread quickly. Within hours, Admiral Hawkins had organized a formal ceremony to announce Robert and Sarah's new roles. The station's largest assembly hall was hastily prepared, with both human and Brunali flags adorning the walls. As they stood before the gathered crowd, Robert felt the weight of countless eyes upon them. Cameras hummed, broadcasting the event across human and Brunali communication channels. He squeezed Sarah's hand, drawing strength from her presence. Admiral Hawkins stepped up to the podium, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "Today marks a historic moment in human-Brunali relations. Lieutenant Robert Chen and Sarah have agreed to serve as our official interspecies liaisons." As the Admiral continued his speech, Robert scanned the crowd. He saw a mix of reactions, hope, curiosity, and in some faces, barely concealed disgust. His eyes landed on Captain Steele, who gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. The ceremony concluded with Robert and Sarah taking a formal oath, pledging to work towards greater understanding and cooperation between their species. As they stepped down from the stage, they were immediately surrounded by delegates from both sides, all eager to speak with them. Amidst the chaos, Dr. Vorn managed to pull them aside, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "I have incredible news," he said in a low voice. "My latest research indicates a possibility of successful human Brunali reproduction, with some medical intervention, of course. I'd like to discuss this further with you both in private." Robert and Sarah exchanged shocked glances, the implications of Dr. Vorn's words sinking in. Before they could respond, they were whisked away by their newly assigned security detail. As they retreated to their quarters that evening, exhausted from the day's events, Robert noticed a familiar face among the maintenance staff. The woman who had introduced herself as Ensign Mara Collins gave him a small smile before disappearing around a corner. Inside their room, Sarah collapsed onto the couch, her formal Brunali gown pooling around her. "I never imagined it would be like this," she said softly. Robert sat beside her, pulling her close. "I know, but we're in this together." As they held each other, neither aware of the hidden cameras recording their every move, the station around them hummed with activity. News of their appointment spread across human and Brunali space, sparking intense debates and reigniting old tensions. In the shadows, Zara watched the feed from Robert and Sarah's quarters, her mission now more complex than ever. Her superior's new orders echoed in her mind. Influence, manipulate, exploit. She clenched her fists, steeling herself for the challenging days ahead. Meanwhile, in the station's brig, Sgt Graves paced his cell, his eyes fixed on a small datapad, smuggled in by one of his supporters. As reports of violent protests on human outposts filtered in, a grim smile spread across his face. The storm he had set in motion was only beginning to gather strength. Robert and Sarah's first night as official liaisons was restless, filled with dreams of uncertain futures and uncharted territories. As the station's night cycle gave way to artificial dawn, they woke to find their lives irrevocably changed. The simple research outpost that had been their home now felt like the eye of a galactic hurricane, with forces beyond their control swirling around them. Little did they know that their greatest challenges lay ahead, as they prepared to navigate the treacherous waters of interspecies politics, their evolving relationship, and the possibility of creating a life that could forever alter the course of human and Brunali history. As the days passed, Robert and Sarah settled into their new roles as liaisons, their lives a whirlwind of diplomatic meetings and scientific discussions. The weight of their responsibility grew heavier with each passing moment, but they found strength in each other's presence. Their next assignment took them off station, a diplomatic mission to a Brunali colony world. As they boarded their sleek diplomatic vessel, Robert couldn't shake a sense of unease. The ship hummed to life, its engines purring as they prepared for departure. Just as they were about to disembark, a priority communication came through. Admiral Hawkins's face appeared on the main screen, his expression grave. "Lieutenant Chen, Sarah, we've received troubling intelligence," Hawkins said, his voice tight. "There may be an assassination attempt planned against you by extremist factions. I'm ordering an elite human security team to rendezvous with your ship before you reach the Brunali world." Robert's stomach clenched. He glanced at Sarah, who stood rigid beside him, her silver eyes wide with concern. "Understood, Admiral," Robert replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "We'll await their arrival." As they held position in space, tension filled the air. The human crew members exchanged worried glances, while their Brunali counterparts shifted uncomfortably, aware of the implications. Hours later, a heavily armed frigate appeared, docking smoothly with their diplomatic vessel. The airlock hissed open, revealing a team of stern-faced individuals led by a tall, imposing man with steel-gray hair and piercing blue eyes. "Commander Jack Harper," he introduced himself, his voice gruff. "We're here to ensure your safety." Robert nodded, acutely aware of the sudden shift in atmosphere. The Brunali crew members eyed the newcomers warily, their postures stiffening. As they resumed their journey, Robert found himself caught in an impossible position. He wanted to trust in the Brunali, to show faith in their alliance, but he couldn't ignore the very real threat that had prompted Hawkins to send reinforcements. Their ship had just entered Brunali space when alarms began blaring. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Massive ion storm detected. Brace for impact." The ship shuddered violently as it was caught in the storm's grasp. Lightning-like tendrils of energy danced across the viewports, bathing the interior in an eerie, pulsating glow. "We need to find shelter," Sarah shouted over the din. "There's an uninhabited planet nearby. We might be able to weather the storm there." With no other options, they made for the planet, the ship groaning under the strain of the emergency landing. As they touched down on the barren, rocky surface, Robert knew their mission had taken an unexpected and potentially dangerous turn. The ship's ramp lowered with a hiss, revealing a desolate landscape of twisted rock formations and swirling dust. Robert stepped out, the acrid air stinging his nostrils. Sarah followed close behind, her eyes scanning their surroundings. "Communications are down," Commander Harper reported, his face grim. "We're cut off from both human and Brunali authorities." As the crew set about assessing the damage and setting up a temporary base, Robert pulled Sarah aside. For the first time in weeks, they found themselves truly alone, away from the constant surveillance and scrutiny. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, searching her face. Sarah nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "It's strange, but I almost feel relieved. We finally have a moment to breathe." Their privacy was short-lived. A shout from one of the crew members drew their attention. "Lieutenant Chen, Sarah, you need to see this!" They hurried over to where a group had gathered around a partially buried structure. As they drew closer, Robert's breath caught in his throat. The angular lines and shimmering material were unmistakably Brunali in origin, but far more ancient than anything he'd seen before. "It's an outpost," Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "But it's old. Very old." As they cautiously entered the structure, Robert felt a familiar thrill of discovery. The interior was filled with dust-covered consoles and strange, pulsating crystals. Sarah moved with purpose, her fingers dancing over the ancient controls. "Robert," she called, her voice trembling with excitement. "Look at this." On a holographic display, schematics flickered to life. Robert leaned in, his mind racing as he recognized the familiar patterns. "It's a propulsion system," he breathed, "but it's like a precursor to what we've been working on." The implications were staggering. This discovery hinted at a shared history between humans and Brunali that predated their current conflict, a connection that could reshape their understanding of both species' origins. As they delved deeper into the ancient outpost's secrets, Neither Robert nor Sarah noticed the growing tension outside. Commander Harper, his paranoia fueled by the strange circumstances of their landing, began to view every Brunali crew member with suspicion. And in the shadows of their damaged ship, Zara worked feverishly, her cover as a simple maintenance worker, wearing thin as she attempted to access restricted areas, driven by orders from her superiors that she dared not ignore. The winds howled outside the ancient structure, carrying with them the promise of conflict. As Robert and Sarah unraveled the mysteries of the past, the future of human Brunali relations hung in the balance, with forces both seen and unseen converging on this desolate planet. Robert tore his gaze away from the ancient Brunali schematics, his mind racing with the implications of their discovery. The howling wind outside served as a stark reminder of their precarious situation. "We need to find a way to contact both fleets," he said, turning to Sarah. "This discovery could change everything." Sarah nodded, her silver eyes reflecting the eerie glow of the ancient consoles. "I might be able to modify one of these crystals to boost our communication signal. It's risky, but it's our best shot." As they worked feverishly to construct an improvised communication device, the tension outside the structure continued to mount. Commander Harper's voice crackled over Robert's comm unit. "Lieutenant Chen, we've got a situation out here. Some of the Brunali crew members are acting suspiciously. I'm considering confining them to the ship." Robert's heart sank. "Stand down, Commander. We can't afford to escalate tensions now. We're working on a solution." Hours passed as Robert and Sarah, with the help of some of the Brunali crew members, pieced together their makeshift transmitter. The ancient crystals pulsed with energy, their light growing stronger as they connected them to the ship's communication array. "It's ready," Sarah announced, her voice tinged with exhaustion and excitement. "Let's hope this works." Robert took a deep breath and activated the device. The crystals flared to life, their energy coursing through the improvised circuitry. A loud hum filled the air as the signal burst outward, penetrating the ion storm that had disrupted their communications. For several agonizing moments, there was nothing but static. Then suddenly a garbled voice came through. "This is Admiral Hawkins of the Human Battle Group. We're receiving your signal." Relief washed over Robert, but it was short-lived. Another voice cut in, speaking in the melodic tones of the Brunali language. Sarah's eyes widened as she translated. "It's Fleet Commander Zorn of the Brunali Rescue Fleet. They're both here." Robert steeled himself and began to speak. "This is Lieutenant Robert Chen and Sarah, human Brunali liaisons. We've made a critical discovery that concerns both our species. We request an immediate ceasefire and a diplomatic meeting on the planet's surface." There was a tense pause before both Admiral Hawkins and Commander Zorn agreed to the terms. Robert and Sarah exchanged a look of cautious optimism as they prepared to face the leaders of both fleets. As they emerged from the ancient structure, they saw the sleek shapes of ships descending through the turbulent atmosphere. Human and Brunali vessels landed in a wide circle around their damaged diplomatic ship, kicking up swirls of dust and debris. Commander Harper and his security team formed a protective cordon around Robert and Sarah, while Ambassador Thea joined them, her silver eyes scanning the new arrivals warily. The air crackled with tension as the leaders of both fleets approached, flanked by their own security details. Admiral Hawkins, his weathered face set in a grim expression, nodded curtly to Robert. Beside him, Fleet Commander Zorn towered over the human delegation, his iridescent scales shimmering in the planet's dim light. "Lieutenant Chen, Sarah," Hawkins began, his voice gruff, "you'd better have a damn good reason for bringing us all here." Robert took a deep breath, acutely aware of the weight of the moment. "Admiral, Commander, what we've discovered here could fundamentally change our understanding of human Brunali relations. If you'll follow us, we can show you." As they led the tense group into the ancient Brunali outpost, Robert began recounting the events that had transpired since their emergency landing. He described the extremist attack they had repelled and the joint effort of humans and Brunali working together to survive. Inside the structure, Sarah took over, her voice filled with excitement as she explained the significance of their discovery. The leaders listened intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to astonishment as they examined the ancient schematics in technology. Suddenly, Sarah swayed on her feet, her face paling. I don't feel well, she murmured before collapsing into Robert's arms. The room erupted into chaos. Both human and Brunali medical staff rushed forward, their previous animosity forgotten in the face of a medical emergency. Dr. Vorn, who had accompanied the human fleet, pushed through the crowd. "Give her space," he commanded, kneeling beside Sarah. He ran a series of quick scans, his brow furrowed in concentration. As he studied the results, his eyes widened in disbelief. This is unprecedented," he stammered, looking up at Robert. "Sarah is pregnant, with your child." A stunned silence fell over the room. Robert stared at Dr. Vorn, unable to process the information. "But how is that possible? You said it would require medical intervention." Dr. Vorn shook his head, still in shock. "I don't understand it myself, but the scans are clear. This pregnancy has occurred naturally." The news spread quickly through both fleets, eliciting a mix of reactions. Some crew members embraced, seeing it as a miraculous sign of hope. Others recoiled, viewing it as an abomination. Admiral Hawkins and Commander Zorn exchanged troubled glances, the political implications of this development clearly weighing on their minds. As they huddled with their advisors, Robert knelt beside Sarah, who was slowly regaining consciousness. "Robert," she whispered, her hand finding his. "What's happening?" Before he could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. Zara, still disguised as a maintenance worker, was urgently whispering to a group of Brunali crew members. Their expressions darkened as they listened, casting suspicious glances towards the human delegation. Robert's instincts screamed that something was wrong, but before he could investigate, a deep rumble shook the structure. The ancient consoles flared to life, projecting a holographic image that filled the chamber. A figure appeared, clearly a hybrid of human and Brunali features. Its voice, echoing across millennia, began to speak. "To our descendants, both human and Brunali." "Brunali," the hologram continued, its voice resonating with ancient wisdom. "We have left this message as a testament to our shared heritage and the potential for unity between our peoples." The chamber fell silent as the gathered leaders absorbed the implications of this revelation. Robert's mind reeled, struggling to process not only the hologram's message, but also the shocking news of Sarah's pregnancy. Before anyone could react further, Sarah's eyes fluttered open. She gripped Robert's hand tightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to return to Earth. Now." Admiral Hawkins nodded grimly, his earlier hostility replaced by a mix of concern and curiosity. "Agreed. We'll escort your ship back immediately." The journey back to Earth passed in a blur of medical examinations and hushed conversations. Dr. Vorn worked tirelessly to monitor Sarah's condition, his expertise in human Brunali physiology proving invaluable. Robert barely left Sarah's side, his mind torn between excitement and fear for their unborn child. As they approached Earth's orbit, Robert could see the swirling clouds of their home planet through the viewport. A surge of emotion welled up inside him, relief at returning home, anxiety about what awaited them, and a fierce protectiveness for Sarah and their child. "Lieutenant Chen," Commander Harper's voice crackled over the intercom. "We're receiving multiple transmissions from Earth. It seems news of your situation has spread." Robert's heart sank. He had hoped for more time to prepare, to understand what was happening before facing the world. But as the ship descended through the atmosphere, he could see the reality of their situation unfolding below. The spaceport was a sea of chaos. Crowds pressed against security barriers, their faces a mix of awe, anger, and curiosity. Banners waved in the air, some proclaiming support for the human Brunali Union, others decrying it as an abomination. As the ship touched down, Robert helped Sarah to her feet. She leaned against him, her silver eyes wide with apprehension. "Are you ready for this?" he asked softly. Sarah nodded, her eyebrows furrowed. "We've come this far together. We'll face whatever comes next the same way." The ship's ramp lowered, and they stepped out into a cacophony of shouts and camera flashes. Security forces formed a tight cordon around them, pushing back the surging crowd. Robert could hear the mingled voices of humans and Brunali, some cheering, others hurling insults. Admiral Hawkins appeared at their side, his voice low and urgent. "We're taking you to a secure medical facility. Dr. Emily Chen is waiting to examine Zara. She's the best xenobiologist we have." As they made their way through the crowd, Robert caught glimpses of familiar faces. He saw the hope and fear in the eyes of both humans and Brutalize, all grappling with the implications of what he and Zara represented. The medical facility was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Clean, quiet, and bathed in soft light, it felt like stepping into another world. Dr. Emily Chen greeted them at the entrance, her eyes sharp and curious behind her glasses. "Zara, Robert," she said, her voice calm and professional. "I understand you've had quite the journey. Let's see what we're dealing with, shall we?" The examination room was filled with a dizzying array of equipment, some familiar, others clearly of Brutalize origin. As Dr. Chen began her examination, Robert watched the screens with a mixture of fascination and trepidation. "This is remarkable," Dr. Chen murmured, her eyes fixed on the holographic display of Zara's womb. "The fetus is developing at an accelerated rate. I've never seen anything like it." Zara's grip on Robert's hand tightened. "Is our child okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Dr. Chen's brow furrowed in concentration. "The development appears to be stable, but we'll need to monitor it closely. The rate of growth could pose challenges we've never encountered before." As Dr. Chen continued her examination, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Robert tensed, instinctively moving closer to Zara. The door burst open, revealing Commander Harper, his face grim. "We've got a situation," he announced. "A group of extremists led by Sgt Graves has breached the outer perimeter. They're heading this way." Robert's blood ran cold. He remembered Graves's fanatical hatred of the Brutalize, his willingness to sacrifice anything for what he saw as human purity. "We need to move Zara now," he said urgently. Dr. Chen nodded, already in motion. "There's a secure wing designed for high-risk patients. We can barricade ourselves there until security handles the threat." As they hurried through the corridors, Robert could hear the sounds of conflict growing closer. The sharp crack of gunfire mingled with the distinctive hum of Brutalize energy weapons. He realized with a start that human and Brutalize security forces were fighting side by side to protect them. They reached the secure wing just as a group of armed extremists rounded the corner. Robert caught a glimpse of Graves' face, twisted with hate and persistence, before the reinforced doors slammed shut behind them. Inside the secure area, Dr. Chen quickly resumed her examination of Zara, her hands steady despite the chaos outside. Robert paced anxiously, torn between his need to protect Zara and his training as a soldier. "Robert," Zara called softly. He turned to see her watching him, her eyes filled with a calm he couldn't fathom. "Come here." He moved to her side, taking her hand in his. As he did, he felt a sudden, powerful kick against Zara's abdomen. His eyes widened in surprise. Dr. Chen looked up from her instruments, a hint of a smile on her face. "It seems your child is eager to make its presence known," she said. "Despite the accelerated development, all vital signs are strong. This little one is a fighter." Robert felt a surge of pride and love wash over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers they faced, he knew in that moment that he would do anything to protect his family. The sounds of conflict outside began to fade, replaced by the steady footsteps of approaching security forces. Commander Harper's voice came through the intercom. "All clear, Lieutenant Chen. The threat has been neutralized." As the tension in the room eased, Admiral Hawkins entered, his face grave. "I've been in contact with the Brutalize High Command," he announced. "In light of recent events, we've agreed that you need to be moved to a more secure location. We're calling it Haven." Robert looked at Zara, seeing his own mix of relief and uncertainty reflected in her eyes. As Dr. Chen prepared Zara for transport, Robert realized that their journey was a long way to go. The path ahead was uncharted, filled with both promise and peril. But as he felt another strong kick from their unborn child, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Together, they would face it head-on. As the weeks passed, Haven became a hub of frenetic activity. The secure facility buzzed with a constant stream of medical personnel, researchers, and security teams. At the center of it all were Robert, Zara, and their unborn child, whose presence had inadvertently become the focal point of human-Brunali relations. Zara's pregnancy progressed at an unprecedented rate, her body adapting in ways that astounded even the most experienced xenobiologists. Robert watched in awe as subtle changes manifested daily. Her skin took on a faint, shimmering quality, and her musculature seemed to shift and reorganize beneath the surface. Dr. Chen and Dr. Vorn worked tirelessly, their expertise complementing each other as they monitored Zara's rapidly changing physiology. The two doctors, once wary colleagues, now moved in perfect synchronization, their shared purpose bridging the gap between their species. As Zara's due date approached with alarming speed, tension mounted within Haven. Robert paced the corridors, his nerves frayed by the constant influx of new faces and the weight of what was to come. It was during one of these restless walks that he encountered a maintenance worker, the same one he'd seen on the Brunali outpost. Something about her demeanor nagged at him, but before he could investigate further, alarms blared throughout the facility. "It's time," Dr. Chen's voice crackled over the intercom. "All medical personnel to the delivery room. Stat!" Robert sprinted through the halls, his heart pounding in his ears. He burst into the delivery room to find it already a hive of activity. Human and Brunali medical staff moved with practiced efficiency, preparing equipment that seemed to be a hybrid of both species' technologies. Zara lay on the bed, her face contorted in pain, but her eyes blazing with drive. "Robert," she gasped, reaching for him. He was at her side in an instant, clasping her hand in his. "I'm here," he assured her, his voice steady despite the turmoil of emotions within him. "We're in this together." Dr. Chen took charge, her calm demeanor a steadying influence in the chaos of the delivery room. "Zara, your labor is progressing much faster than we anticipated. We need you to focus and work with us. Your body is changing to accommodate this birth, and we'll guide you through it." Over the next few hours, Robert witnessed a miracle unlike anything he'd ever imagined. Zara's body underwent visible transformations as she labored. Her skin pulsed with an otherworldly glow, and Robert could see the outline of muscles shifting beneath the surface in ways that defied human physiology. The medical team worked in perfect harmony, human and Brunali alike, their differences forgotten in the face of this unprecedented event. Dr. Vorn's expertise in Brunali physiology proved invaluable as he interpreted the rapid changes in Zara's body, allowing Dr. Chen to adapt their approach in real time. Finally, with a cry that seemed to shake the very foundations of Haven, Zara gave birth to their daughter. The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted in a flurry of activity as the medical team rushed to examine the newborn. Robert's breath caught in his throat as he laid eyes on his daughter for the first time. She was perfect, a beautiful blend of human and Brunali features. Her skin was a pale blue, adorned with faint, shimmering patterns that seemed to dance in the light. Her eyes, when they opened, shifted color like quicksilver. "She's beautiful," Zara whispered, exhausted but radiant. "Our little Aurora." As Robert held Aurora in his arms, marveling at her tiny hands with their delicate, retractable claws, he felt a surge of love and protectiveness, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. In that moment, the challenges they faced, the political implications, the scientific curiosity, the potential dangers, all faded away. There was only this, his family, whole and complete. The peaceful moment was short-lived. Within hours of Aurora's birth, Haven was abuzz with activity once more. Admiral Hawkins and Commander Zorn arrived, their faces a mix of awe and concern as they gazed upon the hybrid child. "She's remarkable," Admiral Hawkins murmured, his usual gruff demeanor softened. "But her existence raises questions we're not equipped to answer." Commander Zorn nodded solemnly. "We've already received numerous requests, demands, really, from both human and Brunali governments for access to study Aurora, not to mention the religious groups hailing her as some kind of messiah." Robert instinctively tightened his hold on Aurora. "She's not a science experiment or a religious icon. She's our daughter." "We understand, Lieutenant," Admiral Hawkins assured him. "That's why we're announcing the formation of an Interspecies Council to address the legal and ethical questions surrounding Aurora's birth. In the meantime, We're increasing security measures around Haven. Your family's safety is our top priority. As the days passed, Robert and Sarah marveled at Aurora's rapid development. She grew at an astonishing rate, reaching milestones that would take human infants months to achieve in a matter of days. Her mind seemed to absorb information like a sponge, her eyes bright with an intelligence that both thrilled and unnerved her parents. Dr. Chen and Dr. Vorn worked around the clock, studying Aurora's unique physiology and trying to understand the implications of her accelerated growth. Their collaboration led to breakthroughs that promised to revolutionize both human and Brunali medicine. Amidst the whirlwind of scientific discovery and political maneuvering, Robert noticed the maintenance worker again. This time, she approached him directly, her eyes darting nervously around the corridor. "Lieutenant Chen," she said in a low voice, "my name is Zara. I have information you need to hear about threats to your family and about the future of human-Brunali relations." Robert tensed, his instincts on high alert. Before he could respond, alarms blared throughout Haven once more. But this time, it wasn't the joyful announcement of new life. It was a warning of impending danger. Admiral Hawkins's voice boomed over the intercom, urgency evident in his tone. "All personnel, prepare for immediate evacuation. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Robert's mind raced as he looked from Zara to the flashing emergency lights. Whatever revelations she had would have to wait. Right now, his only priority was getting his family to safety. As chaos erupted around them, Robert sprinted towards the medical wing, his heart pounding with fear and grit. He had no idea what dangers they were fleeing from, but one thing was certain. He would do whatever it took to protect Sarah and Aurora. The future of two species might hang in the balance, but for Robert, the only future that mattered was the one where his family remained safe and together. United. As Robert raced towards the medical wing, the corridor lights flashed an ominous red, casting eerie shadows on the panicked faces of personnel rushing past him. He burst into Sarah's room, finding her already alert and cradling Aurora. Dr. Chen was hurriedly packing a medical bag, while Dr. Vorn gathered data pads and portable equipment. "We need to move now," Robert said, his voice tight with urgency. He helped Sarah to her feet, supporting her as she clutched Aurora close. "What's happening?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with concern. "I don't know, but we can't stay here," Robert replied, glancing at the two doctors. "Are you coming with us?" Dr. Chen nodded firmly. "We have to. Aurora may need specialized care and our research could be crucial." The group moved swiftly through the corridors, the wail of sirens growing louder. Robert's military training kicked in as he led them towards the emergency hangar, his senses on high alert for any signs of immediate danger. As they reached the hangar, they saw Admiral Hawkins coordinating the evacuation efforts. He spotted them and rushed over. "Lieutenant, get your family on that ship," he ordered, pointing to a sleek vessel unlike any Robert had seen before. "It's designed to sustain Aurora's unique biology. We'll buy you time to escape." Robert hesitated for a split second, torn between his duty and his family. Hawkins placed a hand on his shoulder. "Go, that's an order. What you carry with you is more important than any battle we could fight here." With a nod of gratitude, Robert ushered Sarah, Aurora, and the two doctors onto the ship. As they boarded, explosions rocked the facility. Through the hangar's force field, they could see extremist forces breaching Haven's outer defenses. Robert took the helm, his hands flying over the unfamiliar controls with surprising ease. The ship hummed to life, its systems responding to his touch, as if they were an extension of his own body. "Strap in," he called out, engaging the engines. The ship lifted off smoothly, gliding out of the hangar just as another explosion tore through the facility. As they broke atmosphere, the vastness of space greeted them, along with a chaotic battle unfolding around Haven's orbit. Robert's stomach clenched as he saw the mix of human and Brunali vessels engaged in combat. "Multiple ships on intercept course," Sarah reported, her fingers dancing over a sensor panel. Her time on Brunali vessels proved invaluable as she quickly deciphered the readings. 3 human destroyers and 2 Brunali cruisers. They're trying to box us in. Robert gritted his teeth, pushing the ship into a series of evasive maneuvers. The vessel responded with incredible agility, weaving through debris and weapons fire. "How are you doing that?" Dr. Chen asked, her voice a mix of awe and fear as she clung to her seat. I don't know, Robert admitted. It's like the ship knows what I want before I even input the commands. As they dodged another volley of energy blasts, Aurora let out a cry, but it wasn't one of fear. Zara gasped, looking down at their daughter. Before their eyes, Aurora's form seemed to shimmer and change. Her body elongated, her features maturing at an impossible rate. What's happening to her? Robert called out, unable to take his eyes off the battle unfolding around them. Dr. Vorn moved to examine Aurora, his expert eyes taking in the rapid changes. It appears the stress of the situation has triggered another growth acceleration. She's aging years in a matter of minutes. As if to confirm his words, Aurora spoke. Her voice no longer that of an infant, but of a child several years old. I can help, she said, her eyes shimmering with an otherworldly intelligence. Zara and Robert exchanged a worried glance. Help how, sweetheart? Zara asked, her voice trembling slightly. The ship, Aurora replied, reaching out towards the control panel. I can feel it, and the other ships too. Let me try something. Robert hesitated, his paternal instincts warring with the desperate need for a solution. Another near miss from an enemy vessel made the decision for him. Do it, he said, moving aside to give Aurora access to the controls. As Aurora's small hands touched the panel, the ship's systems pulsed with energy. The child closed her eyes, a look of intense concentration on her face. Suddenly, a wave of energy emanated from their vessel, washing over the pursuing ships. The effect was immediate and astonishing. The attacking vessels slowed, then stopped entirely. On the display, Robert could see the crews of both human and Brunali ships frozen in place, their faces slack with wonder. What did you do? Zara asked, awe evident in her voice. Aurora opened her eyes, now looking closer to 10 years old than the infant she had been mere hours ago. I showed them, us, all of us, human, Brunali, and everything in between. Our music, our art, our dreams. I showed them what we could be together. As the immediate threat subsided, Robert plotted a course away from the battle zone. The ship's advanced systems quickly identified a suitable destination, a distant planet at the edge of charted space, its unique atmosphere perfect for both human and Brunali life. As they accelerated towards their new home, Robert and Zara embraced Aurora, marveling at the miracle of their daughter and the incredible journey that lay ahead. The stars streaked by outside, each one a promise of the new life they would build together, a life that would change the course of two civilizations and usher in an era of unprecedented unity and hope.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.